All right, welcome to the Transfer Student Leadership Summit, everyone. This is our third and final session of 2021. My name is Jeff Mayo. I'm the Assistant Director of the First Year Experience at the University of Texas at Austin. Very excited to have y'all here. We're going to close out our 21 summit on a really strong note. We have a great topic with excellent panelists and student presentations and speakers to follow. And so very excited to have y'all with us. And let me just one second. There we go. And so just want to acknowledge first that we have great partners and sponsors for this event. We've partnered with the National Resource Center for the First Year Experience and Students in Transition, who do great work. We'll hear from them in just one second. And we also have support from the Greater Texas Foundation, who really has a great focus on helping students navigate the P320 pipeline and earn their degrees in our state of Texas. Before we jump into our first panel and getting onto the theme for today, I'm going to invite Catherine Hartman from the NRC for First Year Experience and Student Transition to come talk about a few of the programs that they have that would be really applicable to students and staff and faculty who work with transfer students. Catherine, if you want to join us here.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. We are very excited to be partnering with the Transfer Student Leadership Summit, and I wanted to give you all some updates about the many goings on and opportunities that the center is hosting and offering. So the first thing is our Paul P. Fidler Grant. This competition is open to those planning to conduct research on college student transitions, including faculty, staff, and graduate students. This is a comprehensive award package that includes a stipend of $5,000, travel to the National Resource Center's Students in Transition annual conference, and more. Applications for the 2021-2022 research grant are now open and will close on July 1st, 2021. Another thing that I'd like to share with you all is our National Conference on Students in Transition. So this is one of two conferences that the National Resource Center hosts, also known as SIT. This conference is a space for attendees, including educators, graduate and undergraduate students, to share with each other knowledge and learn from each other about the latest trends, initiatives, best practices, ideas, research, and assessment strategies focused on supporting student success in the first year of college and beyond, including transfer students. So SIT registration will open in summer 2021, and the conference will be held on October 2nd through the 4th in Jacksonville, Florida. We look forward to seeing you all there and encourage you all to submit proposals and join us. The last update that I'll share is an online course. So this summer we're offering an online professional development course about understanding and supporting transfer student success. And this is going to be taught by me. The course will run from June 7th to July 2nd, and it's designed for practitioners. So in the course, participants will earn continuing education credit and will engage in learning activities focused on creating equity-minded, actionable plans for supporting transfer students on your campus. If you're interested in the course, the registration deadline is June 2nd. And I'll point out lastly that our website has many other resources and materials, including publications, research reports, research briefs, and more if you'd like to find resources to help support your work and more information about any of the events that I just spoke about. Our website is www.sc.edu/FYE.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hartman. You might remember her as one of our panelists from last week, but she and our great partners at the NRC do so much great work with transfer. We want to make sure that we highlight what they do and what you can take advantage of through their services and programming. So I know that we have new folks each time we have one of these sessions. So I just kind of wanted to remind everyone what our objectives are for the summit and what we hope to get done today is first, spread ideas and initiatives to new campuses. So best practices, making sure that those everyone's aware of those and can implement those on their campus. Amplify student voices. So especially during our student speakers section at the end of this, we have students from UCLA here today to talk about their experiences. We want to build a proud and informed transfer peer network. So hopefully we'll be active in the chat session today. You can also direct any of your questions through the Q&A feature. If you have a question directly for one of our panelists or student speakers. And then an experience. So experience professional, well, let's at least say semi-professional conference experience. So you can, so as undergraduates, you can start to get a feel of what it's like to participate in this type of professional development opportunity. So today's theme is transfers function in diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education. And so the past two sessions, we've had much longer introductions. Today, I just wanted to give a really brief context of what that means. I think sometimes when we hear DEI or diversity, equity, inclusion, we think, okay, what's our diversity statement for our unit? Or how can we make our campus more diverse, more equitable, more inclusive, which are all important things, and I hope we touch on those as well. But I also wanted to take a step back and just think about what is transfers function in higher education. For those of us who are at NISTS this year, the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students, their annual conference, or if you're familiar with Dr. Benjamin's work, she talks about transfer as an equity issue. And so if transfer students, on average, are more diverse on their race, ethnicity, age, their parental status, their military veteran status, all sorts of, first generation college students, all sorts of metrics. How are we supporting those students? And if transfer students don't receive the same level of support as their peers on campus, what does that mean to an institution or a system's commitment to equity? And so I hope we can touch on that today as well. So kind of big picture, what's transfer's function, but then what can we all do, whether you're a transfer student leader or a staff or faculty member who supports them, what can we do on our campuses to create an environment that supports their success? So just a couple quick things before I kick it over to Angeles, who will moderate our panel today. I just want to mention that in the chat, Mandy has included a link, so please fill that out if you're interested in the drawing for Apple AirPods. We've selected 2 winners from the first session, so there's one more chance to win a pair of Apple AirPods. Please make sure you fill out that link, format that link before the end of the student speaker session. And please remember, you do need to be present at the end. Hopefully we'll finish on time. There's a chance we could go over a few minutes, but you do have to be present to win. If you want to join the conversation online, let's see, on social media, please use #TransferSummit. You can also find some pictures of when we hosted this event in person to see what other transfer summits were like as well. If you're having any technical support, or if you have a colleague or a friend who is not able to access the webinar, please email fye.ga@austin.utexas.edu for technical support. And then finally, this is streaming on YouTube Live as well. The link is in the email that we sent you earlier or last week, or the reminder this morning. You can find it there. So if you're having any trouble accessing, or YouTube is easier for you to get kicked off, please join us on YouTube. All right, so at this point, I'm going to invite Angeles on screen to join me and take over. Angeles is our graduate assistant in the Transfer Your Experience program here at UT Austin. Ms. DeSantos Quezada is currently a MED candidate within the Policy and Planning Division of the Educational Leadership and Policy Program at UT Austin. Her research interests rest under the lens of critical race theory with a focus on language minority and immigrant students, bilingual education, and K-12 ethnic studies. Angeles is a first-generation immigrant McNair Scholar and earned a BA in political science and minor in applied research methods from San Jose State University. She currently serves as our graduate assistant with TYE, where she develops strategic support for students to combat the negative effects of transfer shock for academic success. So welcome to the screen, Angeles, and I'll let you take the reins as moderator.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for that introduction. And before I introduce our amazing panelists, I will like to acknowledge that we are meeting on indigenous lands of Turtle Island, the ancestral name for what is now called North America. So with that being said, I will now introduce our two amazing panelists. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Gloria Crisp, who is a professor and program chair of the Adult and Higher Education programs at Oregon State University. Her scholarship is grounded by her personal and professional experiences at institutions that provide broad access to students. She has published over 40 articles and book chapters. Dr. Chris' scholarship has been cited over 4,000 times, and she co-edited a recent issue of New Directions of Community Colleges focus on high impact and promising practices in a community college context. She is also the lead author of a 2017 ASHE higher education report focused on mentoring undergrad students. Her survey instrument, the College Student Mentoring Scale, is currently being used at institutions around the country and abroad to evaluate the effectiveness of mentoring relationships. And we also have another panelist who is Dr. Dimple Jan. She's an associate professor within the Education, Leadership, and Policy Studies and core faculty within the doctoral program in Education Leadership. As a first-generation college student from a South Asian family, she received her bachelor's degree in history from Western Washington University and her master's and PhD in higher education and organizational change from the University of California, Los Angeles. She has served in various higher education roles over the past 20 years, including positions at Seattle Central Community College, UCLA's Center for Community College Partnerships, Santa Monica College, and the University of Pacific as a researcher, faculty member, and a practitioner. Her research centers on the relationship between community colleges and universities, most notably how baccalaureate granting institutions can develop and maintain transfer receptive culture for students of color. She utilizes critical race and womanist frameworks with her scholarship to explore issues related to transfer function, faculty mentor, and femtorship, and women of color leadership. In 2020, she has co-authored a book entitled Power to the Transfer, Critical Race Theory and Transfer Receptive Culture, published by Michigan State University Press. The Transfer Experience Program Office welcomes you to this panel, and we are grateful for your participation. You now can join me with your cameras on, and we will start with a question for both of you. Perfect. So I wanted to acknowledge that we are living in one of the most pivotal and powerful moments in our young century. With racial justice movements like the Black Lives Matter and much more visible racial oppression and violence, it is a hard time. And I just wanted to do kind of like a temperature check. How are you doing? How are you both coping with our world today as professors, practitioners, and just human beings? What is your advice to students on how to cope with the world we live today? either Dr. Crisp or Dr. Jane.
I can go, Dr. Jan, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks for the check-in. It is certainly a just extremely challenging, powerful time for all of us in very different ways. And like many, if not all of you, I am emotionally exhausted and not afraid to say so at this point. At the same time, in a positive way, I feel like this moment in time has really renewed my commitment and passion for my teaching as well as my scholarship. And that feels very empowering. And so I remember over a decade ago now, I published this paper on Latinx discriminatory experiences in high school and impacts and transfer to college. And we got a lot of pushback, and our community was saying, that's not a thing. People, Latinx students, they're not discriminated against. And it feels very, even though it's hard, it feels good to be in a more honest space. In a place where we can have more honest conversations about the experiences of students of color and other folks of color in higher education.
Thank you. I also wanted to just say hello. I don't even think I've said hello to all the panelists yet. So hello. And thank you, Jeff, for this invitation. And thank you, Annalise, for moderating the panel. I also want to acknowledge that I'm an uninvited guest on the ancestral and unceded territory lands of Tongva, where I live, and the Tataviam, where I work. So I wanted to make sure that we recognize our current space and place as well. The large question of how am I doing, very similar to Dr. Crisp. I'm tired, right? Tired and just kind of numb, and days and nights and mornings are all blending into each other, and time seems to be so short and so long at the same time, right? I'm still in denial that it's April and we're almost at the end of April. And so much has happened this month. But I recognize that there's a lot of racial trauma that communities of color are facing right now. And that higher education, including the same demands I'm putting on my students, we're also complicit in having students feel just as exhausted as we are right now. So I'm looking forward to the end of the semester. I'm looking forward to continued health and for everyone that's present during this pandemic, and hoping that vaccinations continue to increase across the country.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable, Dr. Jane and Dr. Crisp. I think a lot of the times we forget that we are still humans living through a pandemic. So I really wanted to check in with you all to see how you're doing and set the tone for this panel. So with that being said, I have the next question for Dr. Crisp. In your research article, Understanding the Racial Transfer Gap, Modeling Underrepresented Minority and Non-Minority Students' Pathways from 2 to 4 year institutions, you suggested that transfer may be regarded as a matter of outcome equity and educational opportunity. I appreciated how you discussed the degree attainment gap, which looks beyond access for underrepresented minorities at 4-year universities and to their success. Your work seems to acknowledge diversity as a critical issue, but moves to the deeper and much more challenging goals of equity and inclusion. Can you speak a little bit more on what are some of the ways transfer student leaders can support historically excluded populations and make a positive change in their institutions?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I'd like to acknowledge that the racial transfer gap, the original paper was it was done with Dr. Anne-Marie Nunez at The Ohio State University. So I wanted to acknowledge her there. That was not my work alone, far from it actually. And so that piece, as well as Dr. Jan's work and other transfer scholars, I think that collectively what the research is showing us is that transfer is challenging. Transfer is challenging for all students. At the same time, it's disproportionately challenging for a variety of reasons for our students of color who are disproportionately impacted by various policies and practices related to transfer. I recently, a couple of colleagues and I recently published a follow-up piece to that racial transfer gap paper, where we found a couple of other inequities that I wanted to share with you all. And one of those is that not only were our students of color less likely to vertically transfer as compared to white students to four-year institutions, but they were also transferring much earlier. And the implications of that is that our students of color are less able to take advantage of the transfer policies and articulation agreements, as opposed to other students that are following that more traditional 2+2 path, right? And so that was an important finding that related to that inequity and that gap there. And the other thing that we found that was really upsetting is that our students of color were also significantly less likely to even attempt to transfer credits across institutions when they transferred. And so I think that this has implications for our student transfer advocates and other faculty and staff and folks who are working with our students as they transfer, to help them to be aware of the policies and practices, and that if they've taken a class, that class should apply for that class to transfer, and helping them to do that, not assuming that students are aware of various policies and practices. I've done enough interviews with students to know that even though we think that a transfer something is clear to students, that's not necessarily, information isn't necessarily getting to them in the ways that it should and that it needs to. And so, knowing these things, understanding these inequities, having transfer student leaders help raise awareness of these issues, I think is critical. And serving as advocates for these students in this way, I think is also particularly really important and powerful, right? So making sure that these issues are at the center of conversations and decision-making related to supporting transfer.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And it's very important to me to understand that transfer student leaders know how much how much impact they can make in their own institutions, despite all adversities. So I think that really leads well to our next question for Dr. Jan. And I wanted to ask, I saw the recent video on HSI Equity Talk, Championing a Transfer Receptive Culture, with your colleagues, Alfred Herrera and Santi Bernal. And in that YouTube video, you mentioned that diversity, equity, and inclusion are terms that are rooted in critical race theory. Personally, I would love to spend the whole hour talking about critical race theory in education and transfer receptive culture. But if you can help the students here today understand what is transfer receptive culture and what are some of the core pieces of critical race theory that student leaders should keep in mind as they build on a transfer receptive culture in their campuses.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I also wanted to recognize Dr. Christ and Dr. Nunes's original work on the racial transfer gap that has informed the work that we do so much. And I haven't seen you, like Gloria, in virtual land or real time in a long time. So I'm just over here appreciating that we're in this space together. to get to your question, what is a transfer receptive culture, right? It's definitely a concept that is built and has a foundation from practice. So my mentors, Santi Bernal, who's on this panel right now and will be joining us later, and Alfred Herrera from UCLA Center for Community College Partnerships, I consider the work that that center has done as the pioneering effort towards the establishment of a transfer receptive culture. So it's something that was done in practice for a really long time, and it just hit publications recently, right? And it's the idea that a university is an equal partner in transfer, specifically the vertical transfer from community college to a four-year college or university. And within that relationship, the university is not passive, right? It's not, it doesn't just kind of sit back and stand back and wait for students to arrive. It addresses students holistically. It recognizes students of color in particular and all the processes and all of the barriers that they face that are very unique within the transfer process. And so it's a very active outreach even before the student arrives. And then it's a continued active involvement in terms of retention to make sure that the student gets to graduation and then beyond if that's what the student chooses to do. CRT is definitely a theory that I think informs so many of our practices, resulting in some amazing work around praxis within CCCP. So CRT definitely is a major component of our work. I've shared in other venues when we were first theorizing a transfer receptive culture, we met a lot of resistance using CRT, right? Why talk about race? Why talk about racism? Why recognize that there are inequities beyond just numbers, right? So one of the major components that we use in terms of CRT, and I credit this to Santi and his brilliant writing and his brilliant theorizing, is the notion around counter stories. So students being a counter story to the dominant ideology, that just the fact that students of color are at universities, transfer students of color, that they are embodiments of counter stories, that they carry stories within them and that they leave archival material along the way throughout their transfer process. So when we think about CRT and we think about transfer, we do have to recognize that it hasn't always been as popular or as prevalent as it has been now. And I'd say even now it experiences a good amount of resistance. But it is something that is important to when we think about the idea of a university receiving transfer students of color, how they can do that with a theory in mind.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think talking a little bit more about how can we recognize, like Dr. Chris mentioned, how can we recognize students of color adversities when transferring, and how their identities also overlap with this adversities, I think is very important. So going back to you, Dr. Crisp, I also find that in your work, you have found that interactions with supportive individuals and students' internal motivation contribute to their post-transfer academic success. Can you speak on the formal and informal interactions and relationships that you have found make a positive difference for students? Can these relationships, interactions have a positive effect on internal motivation, or does that have to come from within the student?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. Yes, absolutely. Relationships matter. Relationships matter to all of us. and are critical for our development, our success, our happiness, our well-being. And I think this past year is highlighted how important our relationships to us are, right? So I was privileged to be part of at Oregon State University. We have piloted and now fully implemented a faculty-student mentoring program. And I got to be part of that from the ground up in helping to design that. And it was innovative in that we paired, it was, first of all, it specifically supports our transfer students, our students of color, and our low income students. There's lots of overlap with those populations. And what we did is we paired, it was novel in that we paired a faculty member, a peer mentor, and then a group of between 1 and 5 students, right, in this pod, right, in a mentoring pod. And then for a year, we worked together, we got to know each other, we mentored, we supported each other, and learned together, and it was really wonderful. And that experience outside of the just general mentoring work has, it showed me a couple of important things. And one is that it highlights that our students want and need lots of different relationships, supportive relationships, right? We really benefit from having multiple mentors. The literature would call this a mentoring network, but I see it as more of a mentoring family, right? And different individuals support us in different ways. So for our students, as an example, my peer mentor colleague was able, he did a much better job in supporting students in, connecting with the university community and support services, and got them involved on campus in ways that, I'm faculty, I don't know anything. I don't know what's going on. And so, he was able to do that in ways that I wasn't able to do. So kind of takes a village, right? Kind of that idea, I think was a take-home point. And then the other take-home point for me from that program is we did focus groups with my faculty colleagues who were mentoring students. And I was really surprised at how often faculty shared that their biggest take-home point from the program was that they didn't realize how complicated our students' lives were. They didn't realize that our transfer students were coming in with a wealth of, experiences, and that they were working, and that they often had families and things like that. And so the experience, I think, benefited the faculty and the institution probably even more than it did what we were doing from the students, because, the idea being that faculty and staff, we need to get to know the students. To be able to support, we need to know. We need to know them as whole individuals, kind of as Dr. Jan was sharing, right? This idea of holistic development, I think, is really critical.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much for that, Dr. Crisp. I think the concept of a family, especially when you're away from, the people who support you, whoever that might be, it's very important to, especially me and other transfer students. Currently, my sister is a transfer student in UCLA, so she is, having that, wanting the family part of it and trying to find it through the online community. So I think I appreciate you talking about that family component. Dr. Jane, I have another question for you. In the article you co-author again with Alfred Herrera and Santi Bernal about critical race theory and the transfer function, introducing a transfer receptive culture, you all have found that 5 elements contribute to the transfer receptive culture. I was very interested in the first element of the transfer receptive culture, and it's what you all call the high institutional priority. For example, you all mentioned that students should not be used to backfill freshman admission numbers, but should be a priority of the university regardless of first-year student admission. With this in mind, what are the ways in which an institution commits to transfer receptive culture? And how can student leaders contribute to building and maintaining a transfer receptive culture?
Thank you so much. And Wow, that faculty mentoring program sounds awesome. Like, I'm a little jealous. I'm not gonna lie. That's great. I would love to learn more about that as well. And thank you for that question. One thing I forgot to mention is the way that we've conceptualized a transfer receptive culture is having 5 elements. And we see those elements kind of happening along a continuum. And some we see happening throughout both pre-transfer and post-transfer, but also some are squarely within pre and post. So the first one, as you mentioned, is establishing transfer as a high institutional priority. And I'm going to quote another colleague of mine who also writes on this topic, Stephen Handel, right? Transfer students in particular, shouldn't be used as bodies to kind of balance the ledgers, right? That isn't a way that an institution should approach transfer. It shouldn't be seen as to receive transfer students, right? Or an issue to deal with, right? This is an opportunity to have transfer students at your campus. So establishing it as a high institutional priority, in the book that we wrote, we also call it the transfer imperative, and how this priority or this imperative can be informed by students, administrators, and faculty, right? This can be a kind of an effort by all entities. And we identify different types of priorities, like different ways that people have tried to rationalize why transfer is important. And I'm going to credit Santi again in his kind of brilliant mapping, theorizing mind here, right? So all the figures, if you have a copy of the book, all the graphics, that's Santi. I'm going to give him all the credit for that. But in the different types of high institutional priorities, right, we see different reasons. And some of them are moral, some of them are fiscal, some of them are diversity, some of them are legal, some of them relate to justice, some of them relate to enrollment management. So an institution can have any one of those reasons for those priorities, but we hope that they have a priority, right? And that they are using and utilizing some type of rationale that is more diversity and social justice related to the reason why transfer students should be on your campus. In terms of how students can contribute to a TRC, y'all are so powerful, right? This doesn't have to be top down at all. So much of our transfer efforts are seen from the ground up in terms of, honestly, sometimes on the backs of students, in terms of what experiences or obstacles that they've encountered and that they have to fight back against. So I know for my own campus, we are not a very transfer receptive institution. Currently, our fall 2020 admitted 63% of transfer students, but there isn't any real recognition of that. Just last semester, students started their own organization, a Transfer Student Alliance, where I'm the faculty advisor. And that has been like one of the first primary efforts by students to organize themselves and have the institution recognize that transfer students actually outnumber first-time freshmen right now, but there isn't any institutional acknowledgement there. So start a club, determine your needs, right? Embrace transfer pride, not transfer stigma, and don't shy away from telling faculty that you're a transfer student. There is a lot of power in naming, and we want to make sure that students recognize that they have that power.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Jan. I think it's very important to recognize student voices and how much those are an influence on how the university can help students. So I do want to keep us on time. So I will ask this question for both of you. And if Dr. Chris could go first. I think many students here today are in the post-transfer journey, swimming from all over the nation and living with a range of different identities. I was wondering if you both can talk a little bit about how important is, one, to acknowledge the lived experiences that students bring, and then intersectionality between community and family to our institutions, and two, how do you support transfer students in all their identities? How do you embrace intersectionality and supporting transfer students? And in particular, Dr. Crisp, I'm wondering a little bit more in like what are some ways and practices to build and nurture a peer advising and mentoring program? What are some of the things that you're doing right now in your amazing mentorship program that students from today can take home, or they are home already, but you know, take?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I would say, so I've been giving a lot of thought to and kind of writing about this idea of culturally competent mentoring, which I think kind of responds to that question. So, you know, what does it look like to mentor in a way that it fully acknowledges and considers and understands and appreciates students' various identities? And so, you know, a couple of things there. One is this idea of as us as mentors, peer mentors, faculty mentors, whomever, right? Being really aware of our own assumptions and values and biases that we're bringing into this relationship. So this takes thoughtfulness and time, but I think is really important in order to create a trusting relationship. And then, you know, this idea that we've mentioned before about getting to know the whole student and being sensitive to the various parts of their identity. And, you know, students know when we really want to get to know them or when we're just kind of checking a box and doing our job, right? So we need to be able to ensure that we're communicating. We really want to get to know you as a whole person and support you as such, right? And then we haven't talked too much about this today, but you know, this whole idea that transfer students viewing our students of color from a deficit lens, that's just prevalent in higher education, and we've got to stop that, right? And I think mentoring relationships, our student leaders are central to that, and shifting that narrative and shifting that conversation towards asset-based, right? And really acknowledging and naming and bringing out, you know, the strengths that our students, our transfer students, our students of color are bringing to our organizations. I think that's critical. And in doing so, this idea of meeting students where they are and helping and guiding them and lifting them up to wherever they're wanting to go. And then, you know, a final idea here is asking and respecting students' preferred ways of sharing and communicating, right? This ties into that cultural competency component. And so we can't assume that students want to share and communicate with us in the ways that we're comfortable, and we need to go to them and learn them and understand them and to get to know them to be able to do this. So this is really hard, time-consuming work. But for me, I think it's also extremely meaningful and is, you know, why I'm here in higher education. I expect that's the same for all of you as well. And so I just really appreciate the work that you are all doing, the hard work that you're all doing, but hopefully the meaningful work that you're doing.
Absolutely. I don't think I have much to add to that. Transfer students do come to us as really complex, really beautiful individuals, right? With really detailed and rich histories. And so when we think about intersectionality and identity, I'm quoting Kimberly Crenshaw here in terms of how we shouldn't think of identity as like a self-contained unit, but identity as relationships, and relationships between people and history, and people and community, and people and institutions. And so to do mentoring well and to do the business of transfer well, right, we need to recognize those relationships and how students carry those relationships with them wherever they go. One small way to do that from an advising or staff or faculty perspective, similar to what Gloria was mentioning, is when you authentically engage with a student, right? The question of like, how are you, can just be really flippant, or it can be really meaningful, right? And my advisor, Danny, would also add, like, how's your family? right? Like that would be like what his first 2 questions. And he would consistently ask that like over and over again. So I think that's a way to authentically engage with transfer students and honor their intersectional relationships.
Wow. I'm just very happy to be here, hearing from both of you, and learning from both of you. I think, I hope everyone else is also agreeing with me on how much knowledge we have taken from both of you today. And I think that it's very important to acknowledge our identities and also make sure that we embrace them. So thank you both for doing that hard work and for doing all those papers around race, critical race theory, and embracing the historically marginalized communities in higher education. So I really do appreciate that. And with that being said, I am going to pass it over to our wonderful students who will talk about their counter stories and their transfer stories. So I'm not sure if, Jeff, will you like to say anything else? Thank you, Dr. Chris. Thank you, Dr. Jan, for everything.
Yes, I just want to echo Angeles' thanks. That was, I really appreciated you taking some really complex issues and breaking it down, from the perspective of a student leader, from a staff member, from a faculty member, because sometimes it can be hard to take practical steps or concrete steps with practical advice when we're talking about these really complex issues. So I really appreciate you taking your work and really making it something that we could all, that are here, we could work with. So thank you so much for taking your time today. And Angeles, and also thank you for Angeles for moderating that panel. Appreciate your insights as well. But as she said, we're gonna transition over to our student speakers. We have students who represent 2 different groups at the University of California at Los Angeles. We have the CCCP, the Center for Community College Partnerships, which has already been referenced in the work of Dr. Jan and others. We also have the Transfer Student Center. At this point, I'm going to invite Santi to take over as the facilitator of this section. He comes from us also from UCLA.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. And as I said, I'm humbled by the opportunity and honored to be here with you all. Dr. Jeffrey Maggio, Dr. in the making, Angeles de Santos Quesada, thank you. I appreciate you. And gosh, Dr. Jan, you have been my mentor. I mean, I wouldn't have the critical race theory vocabulary to talk about these things without you. So I appreciate that you were able to give me that language to speak about these issues. And then Dr. Crisp, been a fanboy for you for a while. Definitely the fact that you talk about intentionality and having a critical lens that we need to use in order to do the work that we do has informed so much of my work. Thank you so much for your work. Wow, and I'm so excited to be here with 3 amazing, and I'm gonna ask them to please go ahead and turn on their cameras so that we can see them in all their beauty and intelligence and wonderfulness. I'm gonna have them introduce themselves. But first of all, what I do wanna say is that I do thank you for agreeing to share your stories. One of our peer mentors in our office, Mai, said in the fall, our stories are sacred. And I am living by those words. So thank you for sharing your stories. So why don't we start with Ajana? We're gonna go in the Western Alpha order. We're gonna start with Ajana. And if you can introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ajana, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm Shirakawa Apache, Mexican, and Filipino. I'm a first generation student and trans woman, fourth year UCLA scholar with gender studies major and LGBTQ studies minor.
All right, and Mo?
Hi, everyone. My name is Matraya Kamboijo. I also go by Mo. I am a Nigerian Canadian. I am a first-year transfer at UCLA. I am one of the student staff for our Transfer Student Center at UCLA, and I'm majoring in political science and minoring in labor studies. Pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Great, and Zuleika?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Zuleika Bravo. I am a third-year transfer at UCLA. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I identify as a first-generation, non-traditional parenting student. I'm also double majoring in political science and Latin American studies. I serve as UCLA's transfer student representative, and I'm really happy to be here with everyone.
All right, so now we're gonna do it backwards since this question is for all three of you. We're gonna start with, why did you take the community college route, and how did your race, ethnicity, or any of your multiple identities impact your plans to transfer? So Zuleika, we're gonna start with you.
Lovely, okay.
I can repeat the question if you want me to, okay?
It's okay. So I would say that I didn't choose the community college route. I had to take the community college route because of not having the support that I needed in high school, not having counselors to support me, to encourage me, right? That there were other ways to go to college. I was not aware of those. And being a first generation student, my parents weren't necessarily aware of college or how to get to college. So I would say that it was accidental, me going into community college. But I am one of those students, as was mentioned in the previous presentation, that took more than 2 years to complete my community college career. It took me 5 years to be exact, going in and out, specifically because I was financially insecure. There were times where I had to work 2 jobs to support my family because my father was in an accident. And so it has a lot to do with just not having the support, not being financially secure, and having to support family members, right? But I would say that one of the main reasons why I returned back to community college was because I became a parent. It was because I wanted to break that cycle of poverty and show my daughter that there is another way, right? Provide that pathway for her, and be that person that she can look up to and say, if my mom can do it, then I can also do it. But I did see the barriers that were put in front of me, just trying to go to school, trying to support my family while going to school. And then on top of that, being a parent. So providing, my child with childcare, relying on my family, right? To sort of give back when I took care of them, to take care of my daughter so that I can complete my education and hopefully transfer. And I am going to say that even in community college, there were times where I was told to aim low. Oh, go to a CSU, don't aim too high. Don't aim for UCLA. And I know that is a common theme among transfers, right? And so if it wasn't for not only my family, but certain faculty members who saw something in me that I didn't see, right? Pushing me that, aim higher, aim for UCLA. I don't think I would be where I am today. But yeah, I did definitely see my identities impacting just my route to higher education.
Thank you so much. And I didn't even ask if I could call you Mo, but I hope it's okay. All right, Mo, if you don't mind going, same thing, same question.
Yeah, so for me, if you asked 14-year-old me when I first started high school where I thought I would be 4 years after graduating, it was not community college. It's just something that I didn't envision it for myself. I was like, yeah, I'm obviously going to go straight to 4-year. I'm going to go to the best school ever. I'm going to have the traditional experience. And I had a lot of academic struggles in high school, especially with math. And I kept telling myself throughout, like, no, like I'm going to push through, I'm going to be good. And when it came time to apply for schools, I just didn't end up getting into places that would, I thought, I didn't, it just didn't work out how I thought it was going to work out. So community college ended up really just being like my only option. And that was really hard on me because in my family, we really value education. And my parents have always been supportive of my siblings and I achieving higher education. And I kind of felt like I had failed in a way because there are so many stigmas attached to community college students. And because all my friends around me were going to be going to four-year universities, I was like, wow, am I going to be looked at the one who was like, who just dumb enough and they couldn't go to a four-year university or all these other things. And so I was really apprehensive going in. I like my first semester, I wasn't that excited. I was like, I just want to go to school and get out. And I had to change my whole thinking and tell myself like, okay, this is the situation I'm in. How do I make the best of my situation? And hopefully when I do transfer, I can now be like a form of inspiration for other students and help other students as they transfer on. So yeah, community college ended up being like an only choice for me, but I can say now with confidence that it was definitely like the best decision of my life thus far, my young life, that going to community college. And much like Zuleika said, while I was there, I had a counselor who told me not to apply to UCLA. I went to get some academic advising and she said, yeah, take UCLA off your list and just aim for schools that are going to be easier to get into. And that, already not even really wanting to be at community college, hearing that was really, it was shocking. It was disheartening. It kind of made me feel like, am I going to get out of here? Is it going to be possible for me? But I also have a very supportive family, and my brother also went the community college route, and I had a couple cousins. So I used them as my support system, and I used them to help me through my process versus my school, because unfortunately I just wasn't getting support there. And then also just like being a Black woman, I already know the stigmas attached to Black students. So I just, while I was there, I just felt like I have to work really hard to get out of here. And so that was kind of my experience while I was at community college. It wasn't the best, but I think I made it as best as I could.
Thank you so much. And Najah?
Sure. The community college route was something, well, going back to college really wasn't something that I really thought I could do. I flunked out of high school. I took the GED test and I'm 54, so that was back in 1985. I tried to go back to school at 86, but I was an athlete. I played sports, and that's all I wanted to do. I was ranked in tennis, then I played volleyball and was on a traveling team and doing all that. And so school was not a priority. I got 6 W's and I just dropped out because I'm like, I must have been absent on the day they explained all this chemistry stuff and all this whatever was going on. It was just never made sense. I'm like, wait, how can 1 + 1 not equal 2 here, right? Protons, neutrons, electrons. I'm like, wait, I'm out, I'm done. So I left. I went to medical assisting school. And then I dropped out of there because I learned how to draw blood, and hospitals trained people how to draw blood. And then I started working as a phlebotomist for many years. I then decided, well, I really need to go back to school. And I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, right? So I started thinking, what should I do? Well, I ended up moving with my mom because my stepfather passed away, and I was a victim of a hate crime bashing. And so through that, I was like, there's so many things that I had to deal with that needed to be changed, and all these things that were going on in just like these programs, like for, assistance, and that I had to navigate through of being who I was, right? Like I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have resources, even having to report it to the police because this was in Central California, and having to go to the emergency room and just all these things that were just so bad, right? So I'm like, things need to be changed. Who does this really benefit? So I was really like, I can't do anything about it, but maybe if I get educated a little bit more, I could learn more things. So I started going for photography. And my first semester back, I got A's. And I was like, what? School's not that hard, right? And I made the dean's list, and then I transferred to a LA school. And along the way, I'm like, what should I do? Should I just get an AA? So I'm like, yeah, let me just focus on getting an AA. Well, I went to, when I was in community college, somebody told me about the program CCCP at UCLA. So I'm like, I don't know, should I apply? Should I not apply? And they're like, yeah, apply for the Native Pacific Islander site. So I did, and I got the scholarship for 5 days at UCLA. And while I was at UCLA, during those 5 days, I got to spend time learning about how to navigate from community college to university, and it helped build like my confidence in applying as a transfer, right? So like spending the 5 days, I was able to talk to admissions, financial aid, meet people from the Native Pacific Islander communities. And I was exposed to different aspects of what my next step would be and what it would be like through the program. And my dream was like, it was impossible, like being accepted to UCLA from being someone who's a high school flunked out of high school to being a trans woman, person of color, poor, uneducated, all these things were like, there's no way I could get in there. And people were doing the same thing, telling me, oh, you shouldn't be dreaming so high. But this was the school I wanted to go to because of my experience that I experienced while I was in the CCCP program, right? And it was like CCCP believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And the stuff other students they were always uplifting and amazing and inclusive. And regardless of any of my intersectionalities, everybody just embraced like each other of who they were, right? So I'm like, wow, this is just amazing. So when I I went to college signing day, and Michelle Obama was speaking that year, and it was held here at UCLA. And hearing her speak, it was like she was talking to me and nobody else in there. She was like, you've overcome so many challenges. Make them make room for you. You worked hard. Make these professors teach you. Don't just sit in your room. Make them teach you. So that really lit a fire under me. And I'm like, you know what? When I got my acceptance to UCLA, I was like so excited because everywhere I applied to, I got accepted to. Berkeley, UCLA, UC Davis, UC San Diego, and then Cal State, San Jose, San Francisco, Long Beach, and San Diego. And then now that and I graduated with Mount SAC with three AA degrees, did the honors program, graduated with honors, student of distinction. I received a scholarship called the Juan Lara, which is the most prestigious award given by the Honors Transfer Council of California. And oh gosh, my list is like long, right? And so I got one for a scholarship at Mount SAC for making a positive change and a difference on the campus. And so like now that I'm here at UCLA and I'm about ready to graduate, I'm still making my mark here and leaving my name in places, right? And still doing things. And so now my next move is to take a gap year and study for the LSAT and apply to law schools. And they started thinking like, what law school should I go to? I'm like, hello, I'm a Jana. Don't tell me I can't do anything. Yale has the least amount of the least acceptance rate. If I could get into UCLA and do all these things, why can't I have a chance at Yale? Don't tell me I can't, because, then I started thinking like, what places have the least diverse community places, right? Because like it is important to be included in a lot of diversity like there is here, but at the same time, it's important to make them make space for me. So, I mean, I could go long and on, so let me stop there.
Thank you. I could listen all day long to all of you. So, thank you so much for sharing that. So the next question I'm going to ask I'm going to ask you to do a 1 to 3 words so that we can kind of get the sense, because right now students are receiving transfer students are receiving their notifications as we speak, right? From UCs, from Cal States, from private, you name it, right? So I want you to think about that moment for yourself. Of course, the joy, but also can be anxiety. So I want you to think about 1 to 3 words. If you can just like go back to that moment when you found out your admissions, right? Your admission status. And let's start with Mo this time.
Yeah, if I could use just one word, I think it would be overwhelmed. Like the days leading up to finding out decisions, I kept telling my parents, like, I really don't think I'm going to get in. Like, I don't think it's going to be me. Like, I don't know. I always struggle with a lot of self-doubt. Like, it's something I'm working on daily to like not be as doubtful, because like my parents didn't make me to be doubtful. Like, I'm a strong woman. I'm educated. I can do this. But yeah, so I think I was just overwhelmed immediately. As soon as I found out I got in, I FaceTimed my family, and I didn't even think I was going to cry, because I'm not that emotional of a person. But then telling my parents I got in and everyone just congratulating me and being there for that moment for me, I started crying, and I was just like, I can't believe it, especially because just a couple months prior, a counselor was telling me I shouldn't apply at all. And so it was, yeah, I think overwhelmed was just the best way to describe it. And I think in that moment, I knew like, okay, I might be destined for great things. Like, this might just be the beginning of great things for me to come. So overwhelmed is definitely the best word I can use to describe that.
Everyone that knows me knows I'm crying, and I'm already like tearing up. So, okay, Suleika.
Oh, yeah, I definitely cried when I got my admittance letter. I would say, I was going to say overwhelmed as well, but then as I started thinking about it, and I remember back to when I opened that email, I would say future, because I finally saw a future for myself, and for my daughter and for my family, right? But I would also say fear, because it's something that I was also doubtful, because I was told, right? Like, oh, you're not, aim lower. And so I was like, okay, I'll just go for it. I'll just apply to the UCs and see. And yeah, just seeing that and seeing the possibilities of a future for myself and my family, it did scare me a little bit, because I didn't know whether I was going to move to LA, because I like, my family's not from LA. So I was like, oh, this is going to be something completely different for me and my daughter. We're going to move to a new environment. How are we going to, like, I don't know, like, it was amazing. But yeah, definitely the future.
And Adriana?
My one word is confetti. I could also add unicorns and rainbows and things like that to it. Flags and a big, huge parade, right? From just the person who I am, right? And so, like, when I got that email, I was on the way home from community college on the bus. I got home, I was like, should I open it when I was at before I got home? And I was like, no, I'll wait till I get home so I could like celebrate with everybody or maybe cry. And I was sitting there scared to press that button. And my brother says, well, just remember, you always have UC Berkeley. And I was like, I don't want to go to Berkeley, right? So then when I pressed the button, then I swear confetti was flying down and everything. And I just fell to the ground and started crying. And the whole house was in celebration and tears. And it was just confetti. It was a parade.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for the very vivid pictures that all you painted. I mean, those, again, our stories are sacred. Okay, we'll move on to, and I think just following what both Dr. Jan and Dr. Chris talked about those relationships, how important they are, and how important they are in making us feel welcome or not welcome, right? Either way, right? So now you're here at UCLA. How has UCLA welcome you or not? And all of you are leaders, I know that. And why? Why have you chosen to be a leader at UCLA? And how can we as staff, faculty, amplify your voices without co-opting them? So we're gonna start with Suleika this time.
That's a really good question, Santi. I'll take it back to when I went to orientation, because I think this is a really big moment for me. As a parent, right, I went to orientation. I was not allowed to bring my daughter to orientation. That's the number one thing. It's like, well, I have to find, someone to take care of her while I go to campus and see the resources. And I would say that the main resource that stuck out to me was a program for parenting students, right? The Students with Dependence program. And I was so excited to see that there was an actual program that supports students like myself. And so immediately when I found out that program existed, I followed them on Facebook, I followed their social media, and then I saw that they were hiring. And I was like, wow, this is an amazing opportunity for me to apply and hopefully, get a job, support myself while I'm going to school. And when I applied, luckily I was hired. But during that process, when I was in that position as a student intern, I started seeing just the lack of resources for parenting students. Even though there was a program, there were still a lot of discrepancies that I saw that I thought needed to be addressed. And so I think that was my first step towards leadership at UCLA. But also, I do bring a different perspective, I would say, because before I went to community college, I also got my paralegal certificate to help like my family. And so I understood sort of how the law worked and working for an attorney. And so I thought I brought that perspective into this position. And looking over the policies, looking over how we can improve those policies to support parenting students. I would say that was possibly like the main reason why I got into it. And then just my experiences going into like the transfer community, how we can improve that community, right? Administration's role on how they can also work towards supporting students and not necessarily just relying on students, because a lot of that work falls on students. And I feel like having that support from staff and faculty really does help. When it comes to co-opting work, I think the best thing that staff and administrators can do is uplift those voices, connect those voices to other administrators. I am a huge org chart geek. If you know what an org chart is, you see the levels, right, of administration and who are the people you need to talk to. And so I did my best to speak to certain administrators to learn more about the org chart. And that's a way, right? That's a way that staff can help, is guide us to the people that we need to talk to so that we can make our voices heard, right? And make them see that this is not like an isolated incident. This is something that is happening across the board for transfer students. And again, they can help us get to the right people so that we can uplift our voices. I think that's the main thing, is that uplifting our voices, making sure that we are in the right spaces so that we can make ourselves heard.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mo?
Yeah, so for me, I decided to get involved in a leadership role, I guess, because of my experience at my community college. I didn't really have support from faculty. I didn't even honestly get to make that many connections with other students. If I'm being completely honest, I would not consider myself a leader at my community college. I never really found my footing there. I tried to join organizations, I tried to be involved, but it just didn't ever seem like things were clicking. And I was always one of the only Black people in a space. And I just felt like I wasn't making connections with people. So one thing I told myself when I transferred to whoever I was going to transfer to, I really wanted to get involved. And I really wanted to make sure whatever school I was going to be going to, when I leave, I'm helping impact the life of a transfer student so that when they leave that institution too, they're leaving with the best experience possible. So when I started doing my research after I got in and I found out that UCLA had a transfer student center, which I didn't even know things like that existed. And when I saw the resources they offered, not to just current students for like health and wellness resources, housing resources, they offered a lot of resources to prospective students, which I wish I had Googled it a little bit earlier, because I would have used those when I was going through my whole process. And I just felt like this would be the perfect team to be a part of, that I could help impact the most students. And just kind of I just felt like this was it. This was going to be the perfect team. And so far it has been. I've been really grateful to work with people who really value transfers and the different identities that we hold. And basically echoing what Zuleika said, I think the best way that other staff can be a support to us is really just by uplifting our voices, and not just showing support on the sidelines, like being there for us. We can't always be in the admin meetings, but they have direct access to admin. So putting us in those spaces, or at least relaying our message if we can't be in that space. Before I transferred, I thought transferring was going to be like all fine and dandy. I didn't realize transfer students had their own plethora of issues that they go through. So now being here and I'm seeing that, okay, we're kind of just like a number to these institutions. We check a diversity box, but they don't necessarily take what we say into consideration, and they don't necessarily prioritize us. And now that I'm in a space where I might not necessarily be able to talk to the chancellor, but I know staff members who can talk to the chancellor, being able to relay that message and having faith that they're actually going to speak to that admin and push for the things that we're advocating for.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, for sure. And Ajana.
Yeah, getting into leadership role here at UCLA wasn't hard because I was already a leader at community college, right? And being in the CCCP program, I also got to speak at one of the seminars that was held here on campus. So that just made me feel a little bit of connection. And so going back to like what hearing Michelle Obama say about make them make room for you, that I always keep that to the forefront of all my thinking, right? And so while I was here, like here at UCLA, like I'm involved in so many things. Like I'm a writer for the queer news magazine called Outright. I have several articles published. I'm a student worker for the UCLA American Indian Studies Center, peer advisor for CCCP. I'm on the advocacy committee through the LGBT Campus Resource Center for trans and non-binary issues. I'm in a leadership role for Transgender UCLA Pride. And also I'm this year's director for Transfer Pride Admit Week, which I've already been experiencing a lot of things because they never really do much with transfers, right? It's always about the freshmen, incoming freshmen. And I've had a lot change this year. They don't like the logo itself because it's trying to be like more closeted because they're like, oh, well, students that want to join the program sometimes aren't in a safe place, and then their parents. But I'm like, well, I'm not trying to exclude anybody, but the queer community here at UCLA is just so amazing that we're going to be out in your face. And there are other programs that people can apply to, right? So I'm sorry, but this is about pride. It's about Transfer Pride. I've also changed the logo. So trans is TRANS in capital letters and FER lowercase. So, you know, rather you're trans as a gender or trans as a fur, I got your back, right? Because I'm the director. So I'm really trying to make a difference with being a transfer student here at UCLA and pushing those forward. And if they don't like it, well, I'm the director, kick me out and get someone else and go back in the closet then, because I'm graduating and I'm moving on, but I'm still leaving my mark here. And so I just remember what Michelle Obama said. And she also said, people only want for you what they think you deserve, right? I'm here as a UCLA student. I deserve anything anybody else gets as a UCLA student, regardless of being a transfer, regardless of any identity. I'm a student and I deserve everything that every other student gets. So thank you, Michelle Obama, for helping me also.
Yes, thank you, Michelle Obama, for sure. Yes. Last question, and I think we have enough time to just ask each of you to respond to it. You know, you're now, we think of that we have completed our work because you're graduating, right? You know, it's like we walk you through the community college process, we welcome you to this space, or maybe not. And now we think, okay, we're done. But our job is not done, right? Our job continues because there's your plans. You know, what happens after graduation, and how have we foster and help you in a very genuine way to get to the next step, or how we have not. So we're gonna start now. Let's start with Ajana, because you already talked about law school. So let's talk about that.
Wow, can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. Just how have UCLA encouraged, supported you into your next step after graduation, or not?
Well, I really haven't had any things to really have to deal with, because even the minor things like such as housing, I didn't get housing and I had to appeal. I just reached out to CCCP, and so CCCP has always been my go-to place with anything that I've struggled with, and it really hasn't been much, but because I've also learned that you just have to ask. If you're struggling with something, just ask. Like, asking can sometimes be the hardest part, but it's also the most important part to get something, right? And being a student here at UCLA, there's so much resources, right? But being a person of color and, always told, oh, do things, being raised in a family where do it for yourself, you shouldn't ask for help, you have more pride in doing it yourself. That's not true, right? You have just as much pride asking for help and getting resources that you don't have, right? That are available to you. So I haven't really had any bad things, only because I've always taken that attitude where I deserve things just like any other student, regardless of being transfer or not.
Thank you, Jana. And Suleika?
Yeah, so in terms of support, I would say that a lot of the times when transfers transfer in, we're kind of late to the game for a lot of like research opportunities for grad, right? Applying for like preparing students for graduate studies and professional studies. And I think that staff and faculty also, because I feel like faculty often ignores that they have transfer students in their classrooms. Being aware, I think just being aware of the transfer experience, being aware of the transfer timeline, I think is really crucial, because again, we only have like 2 years to get everything done and then get out. But I would also say that, like in terms of like for myself, like plans after graduation, I'm also wanting to go to law school, so I definitely identify with that. But I also didn't really expect myself to want to get a master's degree. And just being surrounded by amazing supportive staff members, the transfer community, doing the work that I had been doing in the transfer student representative's office, I found like an unhidden passion for education. And having people support me through that application process, right, was really helpful. And so yes, I did apply to the Master's Program of Education of Organizational Change, and I was accepted. So I will be a double Bruin at UCLA to get my master's, and then I'm planning on studying hopefully in the summer for law school and continuing with that too. But I think that obviously education is like a never-ending journey, and I think that honestly, the support of staff members like you, Santi, and Alfred, and Paulo, and everyone who's been so supportive in this journey, like you all make a difference in our lives. And I hope that you know that, because you inspire us to continue this educational journey. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mo?
Yeah, so for myself, I also plan on going to law school. I think that's the trend. At the moment, I'm not planning on taking a gap year, but I may have to rethink that. But yeah, so, and I think it's a little bit different for me because I am a first year, so I came in this virtual space. And so I definitely don't think I'm getting as much support as I would have got if I came in when things were in person. But I also understand that because I have a leadership position, that I have more support than other transfers who came in during this time. So I wouldn't necessarily say I feel unsupported, because I have amazing coworkers and supervisors who I can reach out to. And like one of my supervisors, Sarah, like she's always plugging me, like if you need someone to talk to, I know somebody. And Paulo the same. So I know that if I need something, I have a network of people I can reach out to. But I do know that like I'm kind of in a place of privilege because I have a leadership role, versus if I didn't get this job at the transfer center, or if I didn't join other organizations, I might not necessarily be getting that support, because this virtual space has been a little bit weird. But yeah, the plan right now is law school, and I'm excited for this journey.
Thank you. I'm excited for you all. So, and thank you for sharing your narratives with us. Shout out to our new Transfer Center Director, Karina Salazar. Welcome back to the Transfer family. Thank you all for hanging out with us, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Mayo.
Thank you all so much. I think I speak for everyone in attendance that student panel really left us inspired, left us with great advice. And if I can paraphrase what Ajana was saying from Michelle Obama is, make them make space might sum up the entire 3 sessions of the Transfer Summit in one sentence. That if you, I'll just say from my experience with the schools I've worked with, and especially with my work with transfer students and students of color, that if you don't, other students on campus have been made to feel with a certain history on campus that they are entitled to that space, and other students are felt that they are not entitled to that space. And it's important that students feel that they can get others to make that space and make their own space. That's certainly not enough. And I think Alfred has maybe said this already in the chat. He certainly said it in our conversations before, but the staff and faculty who support y'all need to also step up. That as much great work as y'all are doing, and your voices, and as Santi said, how can we amplify your voices? I like how he didn't say empower you, because you don't need us to empower you. I think the 3 of you made that crystal clear today, but it does help to have your voices amplified and to have access to spaces you would not otherwise have access to. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate all the time and effort you put into today and preparing for today. And we could not have had a better group to end our 3-part series on. Let me just pull this up real fast. We just have a couple of slides to end out the summit. First, just a huge thank you to everyone in attendance, the transfer student leaders, the staff and faculty who do the work to support them on campuses across the country. It was March 6th last year when we had our last in-person transfer summit. And so we had about 50 people were sitting in a room on campus when all these messages coming in saying that COVID had hit Austin, South by Southwest was being canceled, and I have all these people from across our state coming to join us on campus. And to go from that point 13 months ago and change to now, to see that we've been able to reach so many students and staff and faculty members through this online experience, I'm just so thankful for everyone who's participated. I couldn't have asked for more. I just want to say a big shout out to Angeles again and Mandy for all they've put in so many hours into outreach, to designing this program, to facilitating conversations on and off camera. So I really appreciate all the work you put into this. The Transfer Summit is made possible with our sponsorship with Greater Texas Foundation, also our partnership with the National Resource Center for FYE and Students in Transition. I would also just like to say, while I have you here, you'll be seeing a couple of emails come from our office. We really hope that we can hear back from you. For all participants, you'll get a survey about your experience. Did you enjoy this online program? What components were missing? What did you like the best? Would there be any interest in opening this back up as an in-person event, and how feasible would that be for folks who don't live within driving distance of Austin, Texas, to make that happen? And then second, for our student participants, for anyone in attendance who's an undergrad, the NRC has a survey for you. They want to hear about your transfer experience. They want to hear about your transfer leadership as well. What kind of services do you offer? What's been challenging? What's worked well? And they hope to kind of turn that into what they're calling is lunchable research. It's research that's accessible to more people. And so we need to hear back from our student leaders to make that possible. So please give a little bit of your time. We'll have some incentives as well for participation in those surveys. And then finally, our last, third and final AirPod drawing, I'm going to invite Mandy onto the screen to draw our final winner. Fingers crossed.
All right. Sorry about that. I thought I hit it. So thank you all for sticking around. You do have to be in attendance to win, so don't log off if you are interested in winning some AirPods. We are going to do that now. Do y'all see the screen?
That's amazing.
Yes, so congratulations. Thank you all for sharing your stories, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Well, I think on your story and the amount of time you've dedicated to other students, I'm glad that the final prize is going to someone so deserving, Jana. So we'll make sure that they make them to you. And our other winners, we just made the purchase of those AirPods, so we'll get those your way. So again, thank you so much for attending. We'll follow up. We want to hear from you. We hope to do something again to where we can all share in these stories, hear from more students next year, and everyone stay safe. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.